A man, 2 women, 15 children, and a government check that kept growing with every new baby. What started as an unconventional family arrangement in a small English town would end in flames, 6 innocent lives lost, and a betrayal so twisted it still haunts investigators today. This is the true story of greed, deception, and the darkest plan you've ever heard. Before we dive into this shocking story, if you're into true crime and real-life mysteries that'll keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's get into it. Let me tell you about a man named Raymond. Raymond lived in Derby, England, and on the surface his life looked, well, complicated. He lived with his wife Natalie in a modest house provided by the government. But here, where things get unusual, Raymond had also moved his mistress, Karen, into that same house. Yes, you heard that right. His wife and his mistress under one roof, all living together like some twisted version of a sitcom family. Now you might be wondering how Raymond supported this arrangement. The answer: he didn't. Raymond didn't work, not a single day. He had no job, no career, no income of his own. Instead, he lived entirely off government welfare benefits. Every penny that came into that household came from taxpayers. But Raymond had figured something out, something that would shape the next decade of his life. In the UK's welfare system, more children meant more money. It was that simple. And so, year after year, both Natalie and Karen kept getting pregnant. 1 baby became 2, 2 became 5, 5 became 10. And eventually, Raymond had fathered 15 children between these 2 women. Picture this: 18 people crammed into a 3-bedroom house. Children sleeping on floors, in hallways, wherever there was space. The noise must have been deafening. The chaos unimaginable. Meals were a logistical nightmare. Privacy didn't exist. But Raymond, he was living his best life. Every new baby meant a bigger welfare check deposited into his account. The house was public housing, so he paid nothing for rent. He had 2 women who, for reasons we'll never fully understand, seemed willing to tolerate this arrangement. And he had all day, every day, to do absolutely nothing. Then both Natalie and Karen got pregnant again. Raymond saw an opportunity. With 17 people about to become 19, the 3-bedroom house was bursting at the seams. So he did something bold. He formally requested that the government move his entire family to a larger home. A bigger house for his bigger family, all funded by public money, of course. The request was so audacious, so shameless, that it caught the attention of local media. News outlets picked up the story. Man with 2 women and 15 children demands bigger government house. The public reaction was swift and furious. People were outraged. Here was a man who'd never worked a day in his life, living off benefits, essentially gaming the system, and now demanding an upgrade. The hate poured in. Letters to newspapers, angry calls to radio shows. Raymond became the most despised man in Derby. But here's the thing about Raymond: he loved it. The attention, the notoriety, even the hatred, it all felt like fame to him. He wasn't ashamed. He was energized, and that hunger for attention would lead him down an even darker path. Raymond didn't just tolerate the media attention. He craved it like a drug. When a producer from the Jeremy Kyle show reached out, inviting him to appear and discuss his unconventional family arrangement, Raymond jumped at the chance. This was a Jerry Springer-style talk show, known for confrontational interviews and drama, and Raymond ate it up. He sat on that stage, utterly shameless, talking about his 2 wives, while the audience jeered and gasped. "Wife number 1 comes to spend the night in the caravan," he explained with a smirk. "And then the next night, wife number 2 comes." Yes, you heard that correctly. Raymond had parked a trailer in his driveway specifically for intimate encounters. With 18 people packed into the house, there was nowhere private inside, so the trailer became his solution. It was crude, ridiculous, and exactly the kind of detail that made people despise him even more. But Raymond wasn't done chasing his 15 minutes of fame. He agreed to participate in a documentary about unconventional families. During filming, things got heated when people confronted him about leeching off the system. "You're a coward," someone shouted at him on camera, but Raymond just shrugged it off. He was becoming a minor celebrity in the worst possible way, and he seemed to enjoy every second. Meanwhile, the family dynamic was getting even stranger. Raymond and Natalie weren't just living with his mistress, they were also swingers. Raymond had a friend named Derek, and at some point Raymond decided to set Natalie up with him. Derek would come over, and while he and Natalie were together, Raymond would watch. It was twisted, voyeuristic, and just another layer of dysfunction in this already broken household. But while Raymond was basking in his bizarre fame, something was brewing beneath the surface. Karen was reaching her breaking point. For years, Raymond had been making her promises. "I'll divorce Natalie," he'd whisper to her. "I'll be with you and only you, just give me time." But time kept passing and nothing changed. She was still sharing him, still living in cramped quarters, still sneaking off to a trailer parked in the driveway, still watching him parade their family dysfunction on television for entertainment. Karen had finally had enough. One day, without warning, she packed up her belongings and gathered her 5 children, all fathered by Raymond. And she left, just walked out the door and never looked back. For Karen, it was liberation. For Raymond, it was catastrophe. He wasn't upset because he loved her. Let's be clear about that. Raymond was furious because losing Karen meant losing her 5 children, and losing those children meant losing a significant chunk of his government benefits. Those welfare checks were about to get smaller, and Raymond couldn't accept that. So Raymond did what desperate, selfish people do when cornered. He started planning something unthinkable. His scheme was twisted but, in his mind, brilliant. He would start a fire in the house while everyone was home. Then he'd rush in and heroically rescue Natalie's children, playing the brave father for the cameras. Afterward, he'd tell police that Karen started the fire out of jealousy and revenge. She'd go to prison for arson. He'd get full custody of all 15 children, and those welfare checks would keep flowing. It was perfect. What could possibly go wrong? Raymond knew he couldn't pull this off alone, so he approached Natalie first. "Will you help me?" he asked. And Natalie, the mother of children who would be in that burning house, said yes. Then he approached Derek, his swinger friend. Derek also agreed. 3 people, bound by lies and greed, about to set a plan in motion that would destroy everything. It was early morning, barely past dawn, when Derek pulled up to Raymond's house carrying a can of gasoline. Inside, 6 of Natalie's children were still asleep in their beds, completely unaware of what was about to happen. The other children were either staying elsewhere or had moved out with Karen. It was just Raymond, Natalie, and those 6 innocent kids. Derek walked through the front door quietly, unscrewed the cap on the gasoline container and began pouring it at the foot of the staircase. The only way up to the bedrooms, the only way down to the front door. The fumes filled the air, sharp and chemical. Then, with a flick of his lighter, Derek ignited it. Whoosh! The flames erupted instantly, far more violently than any of them had anticipated. Fire raced up the walls, consuming everything in its path. Raymond and Natalie immediately ran outside, watching as their home transformed into an inferno within seconds. Raymond pulled out his phone and dialed 999, his voice shaking as he reported the fire. "My house is burning. My children are inside." He sounded panicked, desperate, exactly how a father should sound. The emergency operator assured him help was on the way. Now came the hero moment. Raymond and Derek rushed toward the front door, ready to storm in and rescue the children, ready to play their parts perfectly. But the moment they reached the entrance, they were hit by a wall of heat and smoke so thick, so overwhelming, they couldn't see 2 feet in front of them. The flames had spread too fast. The gasoline had done its job too well. They tried again and again, but there was no getting inside. And inside, those 6 children were trapped. The fire Derek had poured at the base of the stairs, their only escape route, had become an impassable barrier. The smoke filled the upper floor rapidly. One by one, the children succumbed to smoke inhalation. They never had a chance. 5 of them died in the house that morning. The 6th child was pulled out by firefighters but died 2 days later in the hospital. 6 children gone. This wasn't how the plan was supposed to go. Raymond and Natalie stood outside, genuinely devastated now, not because of guilt, but because their scheme had backfired catastrophically. But they couldn't admit the truth. They had to keep lying. So they did. Raymond and Natalie held tearful press conferences, their faces twisted in manufactured grief. "We just can't believe what we saw," Raymond told the cameras, his voice breaking. "Our home, our children," Natalie sobbed beside him, playing the grieving mother perfectly. The authorities placed them in a hotel while the investigation continued. But investigators weren't buying it. Police had determined the fire started inside the house, at the base of the stairs, and that didn't match Raymond's story about Corinne setting it from outside. Something felt wrong. Detectives decided to bug the hotel room where Raymond and Natalie were staying. And what they heard changed everything. Raymond, Natalie, and Derek were all in that hotel room together. At first, investigators heard exactly what you'd expect from people in that kind of relationship: intimate sounds, uncomfortable for everyone listening. But then came something far more valuable. They heard them talking, trying to get their story straight, rehearsing what they'd tell police, discussing how to make sure their lies aligned. Every word was recorded, every confession captured. The police moved quickly. All 3 were arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the investigation findings, the testimonies, it all painted a clear picture of what really happened. Raymond, Natalie, and Derek went to trial, and the jury didn't take long to reach a verdict. Guilty, all 3 of them. Natalie was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Derek received the same, 17 years. And Raymond, the mastermind behind it all, the man who valued welfare checks more than his own children's lives, was sentenced to life in prison. 6 children died because their father wanted money. 6 lives extinguished because greed consumed a man so completely he couldn't see the evil in his own plan. He thought he was clever. He thought he'd found the perfect scheme. Instead, he became exactly what he deserved to be: a convicted murderer, locked away forever, with nothing but time to think about what he'd done. And those children, they never got to grow up, never got to escape that house of lies, never got the chance to become anything more than victims of their father's unthinkable betrayal. That's where this story ends. Not with justice that brings anyone back, but with the cold, hard truth. Some people are willing to sacrifice everything, even their own children, for nothing more than money they never earned. This was one of the darkest true crime cases I've ever covered. If this story shook you like it shook me, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. And if you want more real stories that'll leave you speechless, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.